There is something you do every single day that quietly destroys your power, and you don't even know you're doing it. You answer messages the moment they arrive. You make yourself available to anyone who calls. You bend your schedule around other people's needs without a second thought. You explain yourself when no explanation was asked for. And you do all of this not out of generosity, but out of fear. Fear that if you don't, people will think less of you, that they'll leave, that they'll stop needing you. Here is what human nature actually tells us. They already think less of you because of it. This is the uncomfortable truth that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The very behaviors you perform in the name of connection, the constant availability, the eager responses, the frantic need to be needed, are the exact behaviors that erode your value in the eyes of everyone around you. Not because people are cruel, but because of something far older and far more powerful than cruelty. It is the psychology of scarcity, and once you understand how it actually works, you will never look at your own behavior the same way again. Think about water. Clean, drinkable water. Nothing on this planet is more essential to human survival. Not gold, not oil, not any luxury ever conceived. And yet, for most people in the developed world, water costs almost nothing. You turn a tap, it flows. You don't think about it again. Now think about diamonds, compressed carbon, a stone with no nutritional value, no medicinal use, no fundamental utility, and yet, for over a century, people have paid small fortunes to possess one, have built entire rituals of love and commitment around them, have tied their social status to whether they own one or not. The difference between these two things is not their intrinsic worth. It is their perceived scarcity. This is the first law of value that most people never absorb deeply enough to change their behavior. Abundance destroys worth. The more freely something is available, the less it is valued. Not because people consciously decide to devalue it, but because the mind, operating beneath conscious thought, calibrates worth through scarcity. It always has. It always will. Now bring this back to you, to your time. Your energy, your presence in other people's lives, when you make yourself endlessly available, when you respond instantly to every message, when you never say no, when you rearrange your life to accommodate every request, you are, in the most fundamental economic sense, flooding the market with your supply. And markets respond to flooding with one motion. The price drops, not in dollars, in respect, in desire. In the way people experience you or stop experiencing you altogether. Most people never realize they are doing this. They confuse availability with generosity. They think being easy to reach signals warmth and care. What it actually signals, to the deeper psychological mechanisms in every person you interact with, is that you have nowhere better to be. In the 1970s, Robert Cialdini and others began documenting what economists and marketers had long suspected. Scarcity doesn't just make things more expensive, it makes them more desired. The very fact of limitation creates a psychological urgency that abundance never can. When something is rare, the mind assigns it additional qualities it may not even possess. We assume the scarce thing is better, more refined, more worthy of pursuit. The luxury goods industry understood this a century before the psychology literature caught up. Consider how certain fashion houses operate. They do not simply sell products, they curate access. They maintain wait lists not because they cannot produce more, but because they have learned that the moment demand is easily satisfied, the desire evaporates. The bag sitting behind velvet rope is not the same bag once it sits on every street corner. Its physical properties are identical, but its perceived value has collapsed entirely. This is not manipulation in the crude sense. It is an understanding of how human desire actually functions. And here is the insight that will disturb you if you sit with it long enough. You are a product in this economy, whether you choose to be or not. Every interaction you have, every relationship you build, every negotiation you enter. Someone on the other side of that exchange is forming a calibration. They are measuring, unconsciously but precisely, how much they want what you bring. And that measurement is exquisitely sensitive to how available you make yourself. The person who responds in seconds signals that they were already waiting. The person who takes a day signals that they had something else demanding their attention. These are not just social optics. They are information. And people read that information the way a trained investor reads a balance sheet. Scarcity in the social world functions identically to scarcity in the market. It does not create artificial value. It reveals genuine value to minds that would otherwise take you for granted. Now we arrive at the mechanism underneath all of this. The reason most people cannot bring themselves to create scarcity in their own lives, even after they understand its power, it is the addiction to validation. Not in the clinical sense, but in the neurological sense. Every time you send a message and receive a quick reply, a small reward is registered. Every time you make yourself available and someone responds gratefully, your nervous system files it as evidence that you matter, that you are valued, that you are safe. The problem is that this loop runs in reverse. The more you rely on others' responses to confirm your value, the more behavior you perform in service of triggering those responses. And the more of that behavior you perform, the more your status, in the unconscious calculus of everyone around you, quietly declines. Approval seeking is the great silent tax of social life. It costs you far more than it pays. Every time you explain yourself when no explanation was required, you have spent status. Every time you follow up on a message that was deliberately not answered, you have spent status. Every time you bend your position in an argument, simply because the other person went cold, you have spent status. And status, unlike money, is extraordinarily difficult to earn back once it has been squandered. The truth is, the most magnetic people you have ever encountered in your life, the ones whose presence seemed to carry weight, whose approval you found yourself quietly wanting, were not working harder to be liked. They were working less. They gave their attention as something scarce, and therefore valuable. They did not chase. And that very quality, the quiet refusal to chase, was the source of their gravity. You interpreted it as confidence. You were partially right. But underneath the confidence was something more structural. They had broken the addiction to validation, and, in doing so, they had placed the social power exactly where it belongs, with themselves. History is filled with figures who understood that the most powerful move is often no move at all. Consider the pattern across any era of strategic leadership. The figures who commanded the deepest loyalty were rarely those who gave the most access. They were the ones who made their presence feel like an event, who created a field of anticipation simply by not always being there. Distance, in the psychology of influence, does not create coldness. It creates longing. This is counterintuitive to the modern mind, which has been trained by technology to equate presence with connection. We live in an era of infinite availability, of read receipts, real-time location sharing, and the expectation that silence means something is wrong. And because of this, the person who chooses deliberate absence stands out with startling force. Think about how desire actually works in your own life. The things you have wanted most deeply, the opportunities, the relationships, the achievements, were they the things that came easily, or were they the things that required pursuit? Almost universally, desire intensifies in the presence of distance. Not because distance is pleasant, but because the mind, denied easy access, begins to work. It begins to construct reasons why the thing it cannot reach must be worth reaching. When you make yourself absent, not manipulatively, not as a game, but as a genuine expression of a full life with other demands, you activate this mechanism in others. People begin to wonder what you're doing. They begin to notice the space you occupied. And when you do appear, your presence carries a weight it never would have if you had never left. The silence is not emptiness. It is pressure. The ancient Stoics understood something about power that most people in their era, and certainly most people today, entirely miss. They understood that emotion, when uncontrolled, is leverage that others can use against you. This is not a call to become cold or indifferent. Detachment, in the Stoic sense, is not the absence of feeling. It is the refusal to let feeling become the steering wheel of your behavior. It is the discipline to respond to the world from a place of deliberate choice rather than reactive need. And in the social and professional arena, this distinction is everything. Watch what happens in any negotiation, whether over salary, over a deal, over something as simple as where two people decide to meet. The moment one party displays emotional need, the balance of power shifts. The person who cares less, or at least appears to, controls the terms. This is not cynicism. It is observation. Need makes you readable. Readability makes you manageable. The great irony of emotional control is that it makes you more present, not less. When you are not constantly scanning for threat, not constantly performing for approval, not constantly monitoring how others are responding to you, your attention becomes genuinely free. You can listen more deeply. You can see more clearly. You can respond to what is actually happening rather than to your fear of what might happen. Stoic emotional detachment is a form of strength training. It is practiced in small moments. The message you don't immediately send, the displeasure you don't perform, the outcome you want but do not need. Over time, these small disciplines compound into something others can feel when they're in a room with you, a groundedness that commands respect without demanding it. Most people are moved by every wind. The person who is not becomes the fixed point that everyone else navigates around. There is a word that has been so thoroughly softened by self-help culture that it has nearly lost its strategic meaning. That word is no. No is not simply a refusal. In the economy of social power, no is a declaration of value. When you decline something, a demand on your time, an invitation that doesn't serve you, a request that asks you to compromise your standards, you are communicating something that no amount of positive affirmation can replicate. You are communicating that your resources are finite, that they are allocated deliberately, and that not everyone qualifies for them. People who cannot say no are not generous. They are afraid, and that fear is legible. The person who says yes to everything reveals that they have no hierarchy of value, or that they do, but they will abandon it the moment anyone applies social pressure. This is not a person others trust with weight. It is a person others use. Contrast this with the person who says no clearly, without excessive apology or explanation. There is a reason this person's yes means something. It means something because it was not guaranteed. It means something because you know they evaluated the request against their own standards. And yours was the one they chose to honor. This is not hardness. It is integrity made visible. And here is what most people miss about the psychology of limits. People do not resent your boundaries as much as you fear they will. They may experience a momentary disappointment. But underneath that disappointment, something else happens. They recalibrate. They begin to treat your time and attention as what it actually is, something worth competing for. The no that you are afraid to say is often the single most powerful thing you could offer. Study any enduring luxury brand closely enough and you will find the same underlying logic at work beneath the craftsmanship and the history. Exclusivity is the product, not the bag, not the watch, not the label stitched inside the jacket. The product is the sensation of belonging to something not everyone can access. The moment that sensation disappears, the moment the product becomes ordinary, the brand has failed at its core function, regardless of the quality of the object. Now, translate this into a personal philosophy. You are, whether you have thought of it this way or not, a brand. You have a reputation that precedes you into rooms you haven't entered yet. You have an energy that people experience before you speak. You have a set of standards that either communicate selectivity or communicate that you have none. The luxury mindset applied to your own life is not about arrogance. It is about curation. It is about the deliberate decision to be more careful about where you invest your time, your creativity, your loyalty, and your emotional energy. Not because others are beneath you, but because scarcity, applied to yourself, is the only reliable mechanism for ensuring that what you offer retains its value. Consider who you allow into your deepest circle of trust. Consider what projects you lend your name to. Consider which conversations you engage with fully and which you allow to pass. Every one of these is a curation decision. And the sum of those decisions is what determines whether people experience you as rare or merely available, the person who is invited everywhere and attends everything is a background figure. The person who appears selectively is the one the room turns to notice. The most underestimated source of leverage in any human interaction is the genuine willingness to walk away, not as a threat, not as a tactic performed with the secret hope that the other person will stop you, but as a real internal state, the settled knowledge that your life continues, and continues well, without this particular deal, this particular relationship, this particular outcome. Watch any skilled negotiator and you will see this principle at work. The party who needs the deal more loses the deal. Not always, but structurally, consistently, over time. Need is visible. It leaks into body language, into the pace of concessions, into the subtle desperation of someone who cannot afford to walk out. And the other side reads it, consciously or not, and adjusts their position accordingly. This applies with equal force to personal relationships. The person who makes it clear, through behavior, not words, that they could survive the loss of the relationship, is paradoxically the person who makes the relationship most worth keeping. There is nothing more attractive than someone who chooses you freely, with options, rather than clings to you out of fear. Walking away is not coldness. It is the ultimate expression of self-possession. And you do not even need to actually leave. The internal shift, the moment you genuinely decide that your standards matter more than any single outcome, is the shift that others feel. They feel it in how you carry yourself, in the absence of the slight tension that need produces, in the way you listen without leaning forward too eagerly. The willingness to walk away is not a posture. It is a condition. And it is one of the most powerful conditions a human being can inhabit. Everything covered in this script returns to a single unified claim. The way others value you is a direct reflection of how you value yourself. Not in the way you speak about yourself, but in the standards you actually enforce, in what you tolerate and what you don't, in how freely you give your attention and how much you protect your energy, in whether your presence in someone's life feels like an event or like furniture. You cannot think your way into this. Self-worth that exists only in your internal monologue, that collapses the moment someone tests it with pressure or indifference, is not self-worth. It is a rehearsed performance. Real self-worth is structural. It is built into your behavior at the level where most people never look. Start with the small things. The message you decide not to send at midnight. The apology you withhold when you have done nothing wrong. The invitation you decline, not because you hate the person, but because you have something better to do with your time. And you allow yourself to believe that. The follow-up you don't send because you are no longer going to perform need. None of this is cruelty. None of it is strategy in the cheap sense. It is something far more fundamental. The decision to treat your own life as something worth protecting. The world will show you exactly as much respect as you show yourself, not a fraction more. This is not pessimism. It is the most liberating fact in the entire architecture of human social behavior, because it means that change does not begin with other people. It never did. It begins with the standard you set when no one is watching, with the choice you make in the quiet moment before you reach for the phone, before you explain yourself, before you say yes when everything in your body is telling you to say no. Most people will never make that choice. They will spend their lives waiting to be valued by others, not realizing that they are the ones who set the price. Raw your floor, protect your energy, walk at your own pace, and let the world learn to keep up.